a lot of people struggle with anxiety, and the reason they struggle with anxiety is not because they have anxiety. Having anxiety is something everybody has. It's a gift that Hashem gave us so that we can be protected in the right times. The reason we struggle with anxiety is because it sometimes gets out of hand.
The answers don't really exist in the way that some people think they do. In other words, if you have strep, you go to the doctor, you expect you're going to get antibiotics, and then you're going to get better. When it comes to mental health, a lot of times people have that same idea, which is I'm going to go to therapy as if therapy is like a thing, and then I'll get better. On some level, we all struggle from anxiety, right? On some level, anxiety is part of life.
For the first minute when the fire alarm in your house goes off by mistake, for the first minute you're okay with it. You're like, oh, it's going to shut. But after it goes 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, you're like, it becomes overwhelming. You really start going crazy. And that's what happens with anxiety. When you have that alarm for way too long, it really overtakes your life.
If something's uncomfortable, the body goes and makes you uncomfortable. So you stay away from that discomfort. So you don't do things that are dangerous, which make you feel uncomfortable, and you don't end up dead. That's the whole thing. The key isn't to fix it. The key is to stop making it bigger than it is.
I'm a believer that if something can help you, then go take the help. I love that line. Welcome to another episode of Positivity. Today I have here my good friend, Rabbi Yisroel Wahl. And we've done a podcast in the past. It was a little bit before I had this setup in the Positivity. And the reason we're doing this podcast is because so many people asked me after I released the podcast, can you please send me this anxiety podcast? And what I had, the awareness that I had is that a lot of people struggle with anxiety. And the reason they struggle with anxiety is not because they have anxiety. Having anxiety is something everybody has. It's a gift that Hashem gave us so that we can be protected in the right times. I hope I'm doing it correctly, so you're going to elaborate on that. But the reason we struggle with anxiety is because it sometimes gets out of hand. We don't believe in Hashem. We don't trust the process. Our anxiety is overwhelming. The alarms are going off way too hard, too strong. And that's where an anxiety expert comes into place. That's where we need somebody like Rabbi Yisroel that can teach us and tell us from his experience in school, from his experience with people, from his experience as being a high Mashiach, what our anxiety, where does it come from, what does it mean, when is it a good thing, when is it a bad thing, when should somebody go for help. So I'm very happy that he's here today. I also want to say, guys, a reminder, please like the video, share, subscribe, be a part of the community. I love all of your feedback. So thank you very much. I have this podcast just to be able to share. Somebody said a comment today, and I just have to say this. I saw a comment somebody wrote on a website where the podcast was posted, and I was very happy to see that my podcast gets a lot more views than all the other podcasts out there, so it was a big compliment. But somebody wrote over there, who do you think you are, you schmuck? You know, you're somebody that's not even you were not successful in yeshiva, and now you think that you can talk. And it hit home because he is so right. I did not do well in yeshiva, and I'm just a schmuck that tries to talk and bring awareness. So thank you to whoever wrote that comment. And to all the haters, I'm here. You give me the fuel. And to all the people that love on me, I appreciate it. I appreciate your support. So without further ado, help me welcome Yisroel Wahl. How you doing, Yisroel?
There aren't that many people that say that, right? That are willing to hey, someone's going to smash me. No, but there's something amazing about this because what happens is a lot of times we have our things that make us comfortable. So let's say I'm in yeshiva and I'm successful in yeshiva, that becomes like my space that this is who I am.
Right.
So then I see someone else that goes out there that makes noise, and then it's like, this guy, this guy's making noise. So he's a somebody. I thought I was a somebody, but he didn't even do the things that I did. Right. So now I feel uncomfortable because then maybe I'm not really such a good guy. Right. So I have to go attack the other guy. It's a crazy life because sometimes the things that keep us secure become our biggest, they hold us the most in place.
Wow.
Because if I did something and it worked, now I could sit and be like, I'm okay because I did this.
Wow.
And then when I see someone else that comes out and does something and he doesn't have what I have, and he's successful, he's making noise, he's doing things, people are looking at him, then I'm like, maybe I'm not such a good guy.
Wow.
And that comes in the way. And that's really, really big idea. But it's hard to just be like, anyway, go on.
Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you. That truly validated me. And but it's a gift. It's a gift, and this power to keep on going is something that Hashem gave me, really. And what I noticed is, and Rabbi Manas Friedman, that was on the podcast a few weeks ago, he helped me by explaining to me that do it for others, not for you, and you'll notice that all the fear fades away. You speak about anxiety. This guy helped me a lot because there's no anxiety. Hate on me, love on me, talk about me. It doesn't. How does it affect me? I'm doing my shlichus. I'm doing my God-given talent, and if I hold it in, then I'm just gonna feel constipated. They call it emotional constipation, where you're keeping in something that has to be expressed. So, and Rabbi Manas actually also helped me when it comes to anxiety, because I was going on a date that same day and I had anxiety. I tell Rabbi Manas I'm freaking out, and he said, "You're only having anxiety because you're afraid if this girl is gonna like you or not. If you go to this date and you try to think about yourself and do you like this girl, then the anxiety will go away." So that was truly helpful. I was still a little bit anxious because I felt myself in the depth of anxiety, and it wasn't just a surface anxiety. But before we get into it, Yisroel, a lot of people love when the guest does like a little bit of an introduction so that they can notice that before they get into the train with you for the next hour or hour and a half, as long as it's going to take, they want to understand who is talking to me. So if you can elaborate a little bit your experience. I know
there's so much to talk about, but I think I actually have a very big belief, which may be going against some people, but I think you're the right guy that goes down that road. And it's as follows. Especially in the mental health world, there's so many struggles, and obviously we've heard about the tragedies recently and whatever it is, and everyone's like, should I get help, and how do I get help, and where do I get help from? And I'm very much a believer in one concept, which is the answers don't really exist in the way that some people think they do. In other words, if you have strep, you go to the doctor, you expect you're going to get antibiotics, and then you're going to get better. That's what you think in your mind. I go to the doctor, I get antibiotics, I get better. When it comes to mental health, a lot of times people have that same idea, which is I'm going to go to therapy as if therapy is like a thing, and then I'll get better. And I think what people need to ask a lot more is, if I'm struggling with X, if I'm struggling with Y, if I'm struggling with Z, were there other people that went there and got helped? Instead of thinking that I'm going to go to this guy because someone heard that he's a great guy at X, we think that the answers are so clear that it's almost, if this guy has the book, then it'll help me.
Wow.
We need to be able to find out one question. Has there people been successful with this person or this woman, this lady, this man in this situation, so that maybe they'll help me too. But thinking that there's an answer of just going to a somebody, I think ends up hurting a lot of people. We don't have it that clear that we can look at a guy and be like, oh, I think I should listen to him because of this, because of that. Got to find out. Has this work for this person in this situation?
Right.
Has it not? And I think when it comes to anxiety, for example, anxiety is something that has been studied in many ways more than a lot of other emotions, and there are approaches that work.
Right.
And like the thing that bothers me, and we've spoken about this in the last podcast, is there are too many people that are going for help for too long without seeing results that they really should be seeing.
Right.
And we have to be able to ask ourselves, and I think that's more important than anything else, is for people to just be able to say, like, is this working? And like, trust yourself a little more on like, if this is actually working, and not just believing in the guy or the person as like the answer, and thinking a little more about myself and saying, does this work for me?
Right.
And maybe that's not happening enough. Anxiety of all struggles has more clear-cut approaches to it.
Right.
And we shouldn't think of anxiety as this all-consuming kind of thing that I'm just stuck with. And like, oh, maybe I'll hear another insight. Maybe I'll hear another answer. I really would love if people would just understand better. Like, it doesn't have to be this way.
Wow.
But If I may, jump right in, because
Okay.
you had mentioned something really important. On some level, we all struggle from anxiety, right? On some level, anxiety is part of life. The mistake that we make is thinking that anxiety is supposed to be cured instead of realizing that the key to overcoming anxiety is that anxiety will come
Mhm.
and not overwhelm me.
Yeah.
So the key is not I what's my answer to anxiety, as in like, now I turned it off, right? The key is how do I have that anxiety or anxious thoughts will come and they just won't overwhelm me? Because like you said,
Yeah.
the anxiety is about there's supposed to be noise. It's
Yeah.
supposed to awaken you. The idea of anxiety is something's off.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean it's right. It could be it's coming up in cases where there isn't anything off. But all that we're supposed to do with that is just recognize, oh, something's going on. Is there actually an issue or is there not? If there is, I'll take care of it. If there isn't, I'll be fine because it's just another noise. It's an alarm bell that says maybe something's off.
Right.
And if we do that a little bit and shift from the perspective of anxiety, how do I cure it, to anxiety, how do I just create a world where it doesn't move to a place it shouldn't, we'd be a lot better off.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Wow. Very, very well said. I love what you said because anxiety is, like you said, it's simply an alarm, and most people don't get it. Now, the more you ignore that alarm, the louder it gets. You know what I'm saying? Like for the first minute when the fire alarm in your house goes off by mistake, for the first minute you're okay with it. You're like, oh, it's gonna shut. But after it goes 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, you're like, it becomes overwhelming. You really start going crazy, and that's what happens with anxiety. When you have that alarm for way too long, it really overtakes your life. Or when it's there not in the right places, right? Because when you're in shul and you're davening Shemona Esrei and everybody's quiet, and then suddenly the alarm goes off, it's all crazy, right? But if it's in a noisy place and the alarm is, then you don't even notice it. So in our life, the same thing. Anxiety, when it's healthy and it's there, that's okay. But anxiety, when it's not healthy, when you're going for a regular Shabbos, you're going away, or when you're having a regular business meeting, or you're having an average night at home, and suddenly that alarm inside you goes off and you have anxiety, it really starts to hurt. It really starts to block you in. Now you're afraid of going out and expanding or enjoying your life in the first place. So I want to go into a little bit deeper to define even anxiety in the first place. So that alarm, why isn't it set correctly for most people? Is it by default set correctly and it gets messed up, or where do we go wrong?
It's a very, very good question. And I don't want to make this too complicated because I
Yeah.
think we're going to like lose
Okay.
everyone. But on a simple level, the idea of anxiety is that there's a mechanism in our mind which tells us what we should focus on. So, for example, if I'm driving, because I can't sit straight, and they'll probably notice after a while, but I can't sit straight. So, like before there was Zoom, when I would deal with clients and they wanted to talk on the phone or whatever, so I would get in my car and drive because, like,
Oh wow.
I just can't sit straight. Then
Okay.
I'm driving. I don't know where I'm going. Like I have no
Yeah.
idea. I could be in like, I don't know. I could end up in who knows where. I don't know where I am. I don't know the cars I'm passing
Right.
by, right? Any of that stuff. But if the car in front of me hits the brakes, I'm gonna all of a sudden forget everything and hit the brakes.
Because your mind is, yes,
Right.
it's like
And
unconsciously even watching the road.
right. And that's important, right? Because if that wouldn't happen, I'll be dead.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And to take it a step further, if you're walking down the street and a car's coming, you jump out of the way, and I ask you why you jumped out of the way, you probably tell me because a car's coming. But really, you jumped out of the way before you even thought about if a car's coming,
Right.
right? So there's a mechanism that always has to be there, which says, I have to get this person to watch out,
Yeah.
right? Like, because if we didn't have that, we'd all be dead,
Yeah.
right? So, like, that's like the first sort of the primary step. We wouldn't call that anxiety, but there's a mechanism that tells us what to focus on. But how does the mind know what to focus on?
Okay.
So that's going to depend on what matters to me. Now, what matters to me is going to be dependent on what I've experienced in life,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if one person has experienced, as we get into traumas and stuff. When one person has experienced one thing as being as really difficult, it's not because they understand it to be difficult, just it's been a difficult experience. So now when something comes up that has to do with that experience, the mind will go so that I should stay away from it.
Right.
Because if I didn't stay away from it, I'll be dead.
Right.
Right. And I can't be thinking about, is it dangerous? Is it not? Because by the time I figure that out, I may be dead already. So the mind is busy protecting me just to keep me safe, just to keep me alive. The biggest issue that we have with anxiety is that when those thoughts come, instead of them being a alarm bell that says, my mind is telling me something's here, it becomes, oh my gosh, something terrible is going to happen, right? So it moves into the danger of being real,
Yeah,
versus moving into the place of, my mind is trying to protect me from something. If I can just recognize what that is and recognize this feeling as my mind just sending me a message,
yeah,
that's when things start being able to lessen, because now it's no longer about something terrible is happening, but I'm really okay. Instead, it becomes, oh, there's a message. That's it.
right.
Nothing more.
Wow. Wow, Yisrael. Wow. This is why you're special. I love what you just said. Like it becomes the message. It doesn't become the overwhelm. It doesn't become the nothing because you want it to protect you. You don't want it to overwhelm you. Keep it as a message.
Keep it as a
I
message.
love it, Yisrael. You know, I'll share something about myself. I'm young, I'm 26, and the only ways that I've lived my life is either through ignorance, and the world says ignorance is bliss, and I understand why. You don't feel anything. I remember being a bucher in yeshiva. I was in Israel. We did the craziest, stupidest, dumbest thing. You know, went for 3 days without sleep, or went to the most dangerous places, and I didn't feel any anxiety because I was in ignorance, and ignorance is bliss. And then I had these certain periods of times in my life where anxiety, yes, started showing up. It was, it got overwhelming. And then I lived in a high state of anxiety. And then I went back again to a little bit of ignorance. Then I got back to anxiety. And now I feel like I'm in a place where literally what you described, anxiety became a message. And it's not easy, but I'm not in an ignorant place, and I'm not in a place where I'm not ignorant about anxiety, and I'm not heightened with anxiety. It doesn't stop my life, but I'm in a place where I can truly notice the messages that anxiety gives me. And even though I really sometimes don't like it, and I feel like it stops me, but I feel like I'm noticing the messages. Literally what you said. So thank you. I want to also know, how does anxiety tie in to our childhood? Because I understand that many of these anxieties, and I know for myself, certain things that I struggle, certain areas where I don't feel comfortable, literally has what, like you said, the brain got programmed, but on an early stage, that this is trouble. For me, it's, let's say, even like not being with my parents is trouble, because they loved being with me. So if ever I would go away for even Shabbos with my school, they'll tell me 100 times, we're gonna miss you. Like, instead of telling me just have fun, go out there, and one time we're gonna miss you. So it made me feel like, oh my God, like I'm having fun, but I'm still missing out on them. And for me now to go away for Shabbos is still a little bit of a struggle, because my body goes into that, oh, you're not being with your parents, something might be wrong. And so is with other things. For some people, it's going on rides. For some people, it's driving in a car. They have anxiety kicks in. So, two questions. A, how much does the childhood affect when it comes to anxiety? B, how do we reprogram that child?
Good questions.
Okay, all
Very
yours.
good questions. So, again, we're oversimplifying things here, and
Yes.
and everyone bear with me on that. And the professionals out there, I get it. We are, but we have no other choice. If we're going to get too
Yes,
complicated, it's not going to help anyone.
absolutely.
But on a fundamental level, right? There's always little variances, but a
Yeah,
fundamental level, if we look at anxiety as my body protecting me, right, and then it becoming a cycle over time,
yeah,
the the childhood would be a perfect example of that, right? Because like children may be born with certain natural tendencies to fall into different levels, but babies aren't born with anxiety. That's
right.
not a thing. You're not born anxious. That's not a
Right.
thing. You might be born more rigid, which
Ah,
can lend itself
look like anxiety.
right, but you're not born with anxiety. It's not. I mean, as far as we know.
Right.
So what happens? What will often happen is the body doesn't cognitively understand danger. So it's not like it thinks to itself, if I'm not with my parent, this is like so important because many, many people get this wrong. It doesn't think to itself, if I'm with my parents, I'm safe. If I'm not, I'm not safe. And therefore be careful. And there are a lot of books, a lot of stuff that write like that. It's not true. That's not how it works.
Rather.
What happens is it's just an automatic reaction. This felt comfortable versus that not feeling
You're
comfortable.
freaking me out because that means you really can't think your way out of anxiety.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's like on a deeper level, as you're saying. It's like
yeah.
programmed. It's already programmed in me.
You know how you know you
That's
can
where
think,
inner child comes in, because my inner child will freak out. It can freak out if I go away for Shabbos, because, like you said, it's not something. It's not in the mind.
I actually
It's in the
find
body.
that
Now, sorry for
no,
interrupting.
you're
You
right.
just amaze me.
Yeah, because this actually is so fundamental that like so many of us get us wrong. And to me, it's fascinating. Everyone talks about trying to tell themselves
It's very
okay.
validating. Yeah.
No, but
what you said is validating, because that means that they're not at fault. It's not their brain that's at fault.
Yeah. I mean, whoa, there's so much here. Hold on one second. Let's take one step back. Most people seem to think that anxiety works in sort of like a cognitive way. And what's amazing about that is that if you ever tell yourself not to be nervous, it never once worked, and yet you keep on doing it.
Yeah.
Right? I always tell people, like, someone's like, they're so nervous, like, don't be nervous, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's like, when did that work?
Yeah.
Never. Right?
Yeah.
But yet we still somehow think that we could rationalize our way out of anxiety. And I could talk about why we do. But let's just take a step back to understand this. Anxiety works through the body's automatic response to what felt uncomfortable in the past. Not what was understood as danger, not a cognitive thing, not something that I realized is dangerous, but something that felt uncomfortable. Because the only way the body knows what's dangerous is whether it felt uncomfortable. It doesn't actually know this is dangerous. Wow. It just knows this felt uncomfortable. Right. And because danger feels uncomfortable, Hashem made this amazing thing, which says, how do I protect someone from danger? I have a basic system. It's really at its core, it's very basic, which is if something's uncomfortable, the body goes and makes you uncomfortable. So you stay away from that discomfort. So you don't do things that are dangerous, which make you feel uncomfortable, and you don't end up dead. Yeah. That's the whole thing. So we do something. In the past, it felt uncomfortable. So the body now created a feeling that's uncomfortable about it. That discomfort caused more discomfort, which furthered that idea. So then I did something to make myself feel better. Like, for example, I called my parents 100 times, which got my body used to this idea that this is really a big deal. So next time it came up, I felt worse, and then it spirals. The key is not about rationalizing your way out of it. Okay. There's so much to say about this, but the key is not about rationalizing your way out. The key is being able to recognize the message, being okay with the message being there, and that's it. That's it. So when you look at someone who's not anxious versus someone who is anxious, the difference isn't that the person who is anxious has anxious thoughts versus the person who isn't. That thought never came through their mind. And that thought also came through their mind, just never did anything. Never started that cycle. So the key is to be able to move it back into a space where the cycle doesn't go, because it's like, yeah, that's because of the stuff that I've experienced, because of what I went through. It feels uncomfortable. Cool. Yeah, that's the body doing what it's supposed to. Imagine it didn't.
Right. And then what, by the way? Right. So that's amazing. And then what? Go and do the thing? I took the message, but I'm still afraid. Now what?
This is so good. I'll tell you why. Because this is the mistake that so many, like with clients, I'll hear this all the time. Okay. You know what the real answer is? Do whatever you want. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. No one said you have to do it. Right? The key just is you able to take that message and then be able to just be able to, for it to be interpreted in the correct way so that it doesn't become more than it is. What you want to do has nothing to do with it. Right. You see, one of our biggest mistakes with anxiety is trying to make it better. The key isn't to make it better. The key is to let it be. Right. The more you could allow anxiety to be without it meaning more than it actually means, the more you don't have to do anything. To take it one step further, and this is so critical, people think that's, we get anxious and then we look for some sort of certainty, right? Like, how do I convince myself that everything's okay? But certainty is always a sign that something's off. Needing certainty is a sign that something's off. A healthy mind doesn't need certainty. If you're driving on the highway, for example, right? A healthy mind doesn't sit every moment like, oh my gosh, how do I know this car won't hit me? Even though you have no idea the amount of car accidents, I mean, it's terrible what goes on, right?
Yeah.
But a healthy mind doesn't sit and wonder, oh my gosh, how do I know that nothing bad will happen? How do I make sure I feel okay? That's because Hashem never made us in a world where we need certainty. If we needed certainty, we never grow. The amount of businesses that stay stagnant, the amount of people that stay stagnant because I don't know if it's going to work. Well, you don't need to know. That's not how it works. And that idea is so critical because often when we try to gain certainty, that's what causes anxiety to get worse because it makes this bigger deal in my mind. And then I have to hold on tighter. Like, this is going to make me feel safe. So I hold on even tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And if I would instead be able to let go and just be able to be okay with the idea that there was a message, I wouldn't need any of that.
Right. I just learned tremendously. First of all, anxiety is a message, and you don't have to take action on it. You just have to allow it to be there. Regarding certainty, I heard this from Tony Robbins. He said the first thing that people need in their life is certainty. The second thing that they need in their life is uncertainty.
This is
We
a whole
all
nother
need
concept.
a fair amount of uncertainty. But another thing that I love what you said about trying to solve the solution, how wrong that is, trying to solve your anxiety, how wrong that is. And I read this in The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, which is my favorite author, my favorite book. He said that imagine you're trying to get the criminal in town. You're trying to catch the criminal in the town, only to notice that the criminal is the sheriff. It's impossible. You can't now catch this criminal. So the same thing with anxiety. Imagine you try to solve anxiety with your mind. It's impossible because the same mind that created the problem can't solve the problem. And now you explained it even better because anxiety is not even in the mind.
Right.
But essentially you're taking a feeling, a response that your body is having to something, and you're over analyzing it for no good reason.
You're making it into something that it never was.
You're giving it energy.
Yeah, for real. And this is why the key is the exact opposite of what people think. The key isn't to fix it. The key is to stop making it bigger than it is. Because when you're able to allow it to be what it is, your body by itself starts integrating. This has to do with trauma and all that kind of stuff as well. But that concept is you want to be able to integrate, not solve. Integration happens when the message stops being more than it is. So the body could just be like, oh, that's a message, cool. Instead of being like, oh my gosh, a fire's coming, how do I solve it? Because if a fire is actually coming, you should be scared. Right?
Yeah.
If there actually is a fire and you're not scared, something's wrong. Right? So like you're busy already taking it to mean a fire and now trying to prove to yourself that there's no fire instead of being able to be like, there never was a fire. It just was an alarm that was telling me that there was something bothering me. Okay. Good.
So my next question is for many mothers that listen to this, 40% of our listeners, by the way, of my listeners are female. So I'm assuming that a lot of them are mothers of children. And you mentioned that we're not born with anxiety, but we clearly know that there are kids with anxiety. They're bugging. I can see it a little bit even for my 7-year-old brother. He can sometimes be worried, if the house is not full, he's like, who's staying with me? Who's here? So I guess two-part question. How do we prevent the kid from going into anxiety? And once they have anxiety, how do we treat it for a kid? What do we tell this kid? Do we ensure safety? Do we tell them stop bugging? I don't think that's the right way. But what do we do with a kid that has anxiety? How do we even identify anxiety for a kid?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Obviously a broad question that's a little bit difficult to answer on one leg. But to go back to our fundamental concept, which we're working off of, one of the best things we could do for our kids is to be able to get them to become comfortable with this concept. That means the idea is that you feel uncomfortable. This isn't even specific to anxiety. You feel uncomfortable, and that's okay.
Like even for a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, to tell him that it's okay to be worried that he's going on a trip this week
You have to
and
normalize
he's
the
scared.
idea that they're having a concern so that we don't have to go so far as to answer
Right.
the concern.
Yeah.
So that's a great example. A child that's afraid of a trip,
Yeah.
right? So they're like, but I'm going to go on this trip and mommy, what's going to be? Maybe my counselor's going to leave me in the park,
Right.
right? What's our response? Your counselor would never do such a thing,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
now we're taking this, we're saying, oh, there's a valid concern, but now you could feel better
Yeah.
because your counselor won't do it instead of, yes, sometimes we feel like that anyway because like you
Right.
really don't want them to leave him, but it
Really
really is okay.
validating versus disvalidating.
Yeah, well, it's validating versus disvalidating, but it's also about validating the idea of being concerned,
Ah.
right?
Right.
So, like the fact that you're concerned doesn't have to mean that now I need to go do who knows what. So there's a lot about creating safety for our children, which means
Yeah.
a situation of safety and
Yeah.
an environment of safety, an environment of acceptance, and that's its own world, and that must be done. But sometimes we do that to the point where we ruin it because now we're trying to use that safety as a means to take away from the problem that never existed instead of being able to be like, yes, sometimes it feels like that,
Wow.
and that's all.
Right. And how do we work on this child that we feel maybe has too much anxiety or something?
Yeah, that's harder to answer on one like on a
But what
podcast.
would be one healthy approach?
The, we want to make sure that we don't fix so much as to create more problems, and we don't change the situation from what it is. So basically, when a child's anxious, we don't want to come in and be able to solve all their issues because we often will raise the anxiety level without realizing because we're making all this into a big deal and you need mommy, you need daddy, you need tati to come in and
Yeah.
take care. And instead, we want to be able to be that support, but be that support in a calming way of it is okay. And I know you're nervous and it's okay that you feel nervous and I'm there for you instead of trying to create again this cycle of certainty and
Wow.
creating this assuredness. Because very often it's counterproductive and parents are trying everything they can and they feel so bad for their child who's suffering.
Right.
But sometimes we can unfortunately make it worse by now over
Worrying and,
about
yeah,
it.
making them feel unsafe.
Yeah.
Like, why are you worrying so much?
Why are you worrying so much? Or like, it really, you don't have to worry because look, here's a phone and you could always call me.
Yeah.
And you know what's crazy because you know what's crazy about this because the mind is smarter than that.
Yeah.
Right. Like if what happens is I'm nervous about something and then you tell me why I shouldn't be nervous, I'm going to come up with a reason why it's really still a problem.
Right.
Right. Take someone who's really nervous. Right. Like, I don't know, I'm going to speak there. I'm going to go to this event and no one's going to look at me. And you're like, no, you're such a friendly guy. Yeah, but one time I was at an event and yeah, but that event was different. But how do you, right? So when we go down that road, the mind just comes up with new reasons because what was really happening was discomfort. And we then took that discomfort to mean there's a problem. So now you're telling me there isn't a problem, but I still feel uncomfortable. So it must be something else is going to go wrong instead of, yeah, you feel uncomfortable.
Right. Wow. The way you speak about anxiety, Yisrael, is so, like, it really makes me feel okay with all of it. Like, it used to feel like such a monster. And even just in the 30 minutes that we're sitting here so far, I'm starting to be so okay with it. Like, because it's not scary and it's not chronic, and meaning it doesn't have to be chronic. My next question is, so when does one know if they need if they have the healthy amount of anxiety and they should just take it as a message, or if it got out of hand and now they need help?
So I'm a big believer in the idea that we get help if it helps us, and we don't get help if it doesn't help us. And there's no such thing as going to therapy for the sake of going to therapy, because that sometimes ends up with issues as well.
Yeah.
If you have someone who can help you,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you get help?
Right.
There's no answer that says, oh, right?
Yeah,
Like,
this is where you need it. This is where you
need
don't.
it.
You're suffering. You wanted to. By the way, you're amazing.
Appreciate
You're really amazing. I love that. I want to apply that to therapy. Okay, because my last podcast was with a therapist, And I feel like this is so valid what you just said. This one line. I'm a believer that if something can help you, then go take the help. I love that line because that's really therapy. If you can get help, why not get help?
Yeah, and I think we do a disservice when we take it too far, right? Because there are definitely times when people are going for help, and this is where it gets this complicated. And unfortunately, there, it definitely exists, which I do. It is. I'm
Right.
not going to lie. There exists a significant issue of people going for help, and then nothing ever is getting solved.
Right.
And they go for help because they go and they feel good and they feel validated and understood. That's not what therapy should be.
Right.
Therapy is really, really good. It can completely change your life. Therapy isn't, I feel so bad for you.
Yeah.
Therapy should be a means to make things better,
Absolutely.
right? Like, you wouldn't go to a doctor that would just be like, right?
Right.
You go to a doctor because you expect
Right.
that the doctor can get to a point where they can heal you. Now, there are chronic conditions that sometimes someone will go to a doctor and all they can do is give painkillers. I'm not against that. There are people who are suffering tremendously, and therapy is awesome because it just gives them a little more security.
Right.
I'm not taking that away. But the primary objective is, I have something that I want to get better. This person can help and make it better. So why wouldn't I do it?
So, wow. Wow, I'm blown away, and I feel like a different person already because honestly, and I admit it openly on my podcast, I struggle. I still struggle with anxiety. And in this short conversation, which is probably a conversation that I'll replay for myself just to hear the concepts and ideas that you have, is going to help me tremendously because I don't feel like I struggle anymore. I feel like it's
Well,
just there and it's a message.
yeah, I mean, you gotta,
Maybe
you're gonna have to work on it again
Yeah.
because it's gonna come up differently. But I want to say something on this. It's gonna come up again because that's how your body's used to it. That
Right.
doesn't mean something's wrong.
Right, but I've seen in the last few weeks how I became a little bit more comfortable. In to me, the story where it started, where it originated, a year ago, it was this time of the year. Michal Schnitzler has passed away, and there was a couple of things that were happening in my life. Becoming super famous. I dated and it didn't work out. One of my close relative wasn't feeling so well, close friend. Like a lot of things that pack on top of each other, stacked up into a huge anxiety bubble. And that's where I started going consistently to therapy. Um, and I'm still in therapy. And the reason I chose to be in therapy is because I think it's healthy for me to speak to someone. At least right now, I'm not married, not in a relationship, although I'm open to it. But it's just healthy for me to talk. And the consistency that I had with this Heimish therapist that is amazing taught me that it's okay to be me. Literally, the things that you're saying, it's okay to be me in whatever I feel or do. And you know what? Today, for the first time, it started playing into my head. Like, it's okay, it's okay. And it gave me so much confidence that it's okay to be the version of me that I am. And I just love it. So that's truly where it helped me. My next question to you is, where do you find that? What tools do you give to your clients? Somebody's coming to you, they have this and this anxiety. What are some tools that can help an average person, the average listener listening right now, that they can implement to
I mean,
actually?
honestly, I'm not a huge believer. I shouldn't say it that way. Tools can be great,
Okay.
but sometimes they then become just tools when the goal is that I shouldn't need tools, right?
Okay.
So like, what I would much rather
Right,
is
you're only using tools on a broken car.
right, and the car's not broken. Can you imagine a guy that driving his car with those screwdriver, like the old time, right? And he's like driving, and you're like, dude, there's a key, right? And I think so often we do that in life. We're like, I found a means to make things work, and it's like you never even needed that. And I think you were just talking about that because you were saying like, I didn't always feel okay to be me. So what did you end up doing? You found a way to act, right? You found, because when you did it that way, then you felt okay. And it's
Yeah.
like, dude, you didn't need it.
Yeah.
You're just fine, right? It's a little
Yeah,
bit clearer,
absolutely.
It's like, that made me this way. Like, no, it's not okay. Like, really, I'm supposed to be different. It's like, who are you complaining about?
Yeah,
No, you didn't
absolutely.
do a good job. He messed you up. No, we're supposed to be us.
Right.
What happens is we try forcing ourselves into tiny bubbles. right?
Right.
It's like, I'm going to make sure I act a certain way, right? Because then instead of like, how do I use my strengths to make it work?
Yeah.
How do I find a way? So I think the problem with tools a lot of times is that they then just become those screwdrivers. So I think much more than a tool is the more we're able to recognize, like feel that discomfort when it comes up and recognize what it is.
Yeah.
When you can do that without trying to make it better, you're not saying, oh, this is the message, therefore I should do it anyway. You're saying this is the message. If I don't want to do it because you don't feel up to it, don't do it. That has nothing to do with this. You shouldn't be the one curing your anxiety. You should let anxiety just dissipate.
Right.
Right. So when we take tools,
give him a seat at the table.
Yeah, like and let it fall away.
My therapist always says like, oh, so anxiety showed up. Very nice. Did you give him a chair? Did you make him comfortable? What did he say?
Yeah.
You know.
Right. Because like
Amazing.
we just made it right. So like it's like, oh, that's what it is. Just use
Let him
that.
participate.
There's so much more than you'll get than using tools. Not that tools are harmful.
So maybe give me some healthy practices. What do you think is healthy? Because I know for sure, let's say looking at the news every day is not good
like
for anxiety. Yeah.
Right. I it's interesting because when it comes to the news, I found myself doing this with the tragedy that we just went through, and it hit me because like clients are struggling with it, and especially people who are going through mental illness or people who have gone through grief. It was really tough.
I had that moment where it hit me. I was like, oh my God, like this can happen. Can this happen to me? And I'm glad how quick it passed.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about that in a minute, about that concept for a second. But just one thing first, which is I found even myself, like, okay, so what happened? Let me check again. And as I'm checking again, I feel myself tensing up, but I do it anyway.
Wow.
Right? And it's like we want to be able to notice the things that are just not helpful. I once was talking to a really successful doctor, and I asked him about the elections, and he looked at me. He's like, I don't know. I don't really look at the news. I do so much more when I just focus on my work. He's like a big doctor in his work, and it's like, and it hit me like, and me, like when I look at the news, like, am I making like nothing happens? Doesn't make anything better.
Wow.
So there's so many things in our life that often just make things worse, and we just drop it, not because it's supposed to be some major thing, just because why would we hurt ourselves? We're crazy like that, right?
Right.
By the way, regarding, I'm going to talk about this quickly because this tragedy that all of us feel has gone through. There's a really important concept I just want to mention really quickly because it's connected to anxiety. The reason why these kind of things affect us so much is because they mess up our sense of equilibrium. So what that means is I have a view of the world that I feel okay with. Then I have a situation that's so abnormal that it becomes like, oh, but like maybe now it's like my worldview has to change because it has to take this situation in.
Yeah.
And then people are like, and I hear from a lot of women, like whatever it might be, like I was in a dark place. Like
oh my God.
I may have done that. Maybe I would have been someone that did that to my kids. And the answer to that is these stories don't generally happen. That's why it's so traumatizing. Right? The reason why it's traumatizing is because it doesn't happen. Not because all of a sudden it will. We want to be able to realize that. Like, no, a lot of people get into dark places. A smaller group of them get into a place where they're actually suicidal, and suicidal into a space of where it becomes a specific plan. And then there's the group that act on it and all those kind of things. There's a lot of levels.
Yeah.
There's a lot of levels. But the reason why this is so traumatizing is because we haven't heard these stories happen in our community because they don't happen.
Yeah.
Not because all of a sudden now they do happen.
Right.
So sometimes we do that with trauma kind of stuff where something terrible will happen, but we want to be able to just put it in its proper place. This isn't the norm.
Yeah.
This is outside the norm. Let me keep it as outside the norm and not have to take my stress and now all of a sudden make it real at the point where something like this will happen.
Right. I love what you just said. And to say that the next day, a therapist messaged me because I put a status and I said, let's just love one another. And I didn't have an input. So he told me neurosis doesn't cause psychosis, which means that a neurological problem in the brain, like anxiety, fear, stuff that the average person gets messages from, doesn't cause for a person to go crazy, which is which is what unfortunately happened.
Right, and we really, really don't want to. This is just this message alone is so important for people to realize. You may have gone through a lot of stuff.
Right,
That's
but
not
don't.
the same thing as psychosis. It's
Thank
just
you.
not.
Yeah, don't
So
worry that because of your anxiety, you're going to turn crazy. It doesn't
it
work that
doesn't
way.
work that way.
Anxiety can hurt a lot, but it doesn't.
That doesn't
Yeah,
mean there aren't decisions and doesn't exist. I'm not. I know. I'm not
yeah,
saying that doesn't exist.
right.
But it's not the thing that, it's not the same thing as being anxious or even being depressed.
Yeah,
It's a different kind of thing.
right. Now, something that I learned about anxiety is hold on, a couple of healthy practices that somebody can put into their
I'm a
day-to-day
big
basis.
believer in a lot in the whole mindfulness world. To be honest, like I
Yeah,
think we'd all
meditate.
be
Yeah, you told
better.
me you meditate.
Yeah, we'd all be better if we could be a little bit just staying in that mindful state. I think the problem sometimes with mindfulness is people take it as a tool
Yeah,
instead of a place of just going back to your core self.
right.
The key, like the best mindfulness is just moving back because your body might have got like really tense and you might have just gotten oh, it's like muscles. Your muscles get tense for
Yeah,
like your body. You've gone through stuff and you've been re-traumatized and you've been triggered throughout the day. Just like let it settle. This is all okay. These are the messages. I recognize what it is. That can go a very long way, and that's just a really helpful practice. Moving away from things that you know just aren't good for you. Like
right,
there are a lot of things in our life that we know aren't good, and we just keep on doing because like on some level it makes us feel for
right,
the exact moment. For that moment it feels okay, but like it hurts.
right.
Like we want to just let go of that. Taking breaks from news, from stuff. Like could we all just notice a little more of the stuff that we know aren't healthy for us?
Absolutely.
You don't
Yeah.
need me for that. You all know deep down that doesn't help me.
Right.
So take a deep breath. Try to cut out some of that stuff in your life.
Right.
It'll go a long way.
Amazing. One of the things that helped me with anxiety is learning that anxiety and excitement are literally the same feeling. So you can literally go on a roller coaster and you have two people sitting in that front seat, right? One guy is sweating and shaking and you know all hyped up. Both guys in the front are sweating and shaking and heart beating, and one guy is having this reaction from anxiety. He's afraid. The other person's having this reaction from excitement. He is so excited that he's going that he's literally sweating and his heart is beating fast, and because he's so excited. So anxiety, the feeling is technically the same.
I
It's
mean,
just
this
a
is where it
matter
gets
how we label it.
really nuanced. It gets a
So
little
yeah,
complicated because
is it true? Is it not
yeah, I
true?
mean it's a bit complicated. There are similar reactions that the body might have, and sometimes it could be worked through. This is gonna get too complex.
Yeah.
We're gonna bore everyone. I'm gonna leave that one.
But okay.
Because there are different reactions to different stimuli and the way they come into our mind and the way they're incorporated in our mind, the way our mind experiences them, and this is where it gets like
Now
really technical.
my mind is going to the word like chemical imbalance, which is what a lot of people struggle, and medication comes in and stuff like that.
Should we go there?
If you want, as long as we can
So
help one
chemical
person.
imbalance was never really a theory the way that people make it out to be. It just wasn't a thing that way.
Okay.
What that means is that when medication started coming out and started working, so the theory that came out is like, oh, there was an imbalance in the mind, and then I brought the mind back to its
Right, because I
balance.
gave him a little bit of
Right.
this or that.
It's not really how it works at all.
Okay.
It's mostly a fallacy. The idea is that when someone's anxious, especially anxiety, depression that happens over a long time, it can change stuff in the mind that now we can move with. But the idea that there was like some sort of chemical imbalance and that's real anxiety versus non-chemical imbalance, not real, that's not a thing. It doesn't even exist. And a part of the reason it's been accepted is because people felt that it removed a lot of the stigma in mental health. So it made people more comfortable going for help.
Oh wow.
So they just kept on buying into it. But most of it's false. It's
Right.
not actually how it works.
And medication, I think, works, but it's just
Oh, yeah.
only for a certain amount of people and for
Well,
a certain amount of time. No,
well,
one of these two
no,
things.
I mean, the idea of medication working on chemicals is true. The serotonin intake, it will allow the body to sort of take in the chemicals, both,
Yeah.
but it will allow those sort of think about it like a flow of chemicals that are going on in a healthy body, and the medications will allow or help better that flow to go. I think that might be the easiest way of looking at it. But it didn't come because like, oh, there was a chemical imbalance and now I change the chemical imbalance. If you take someone who's depressed, you cause them to be depressed, you will have that same sort of imbalance. Am I clear? You'll have
Yeah.
that same sort of imbalance. It's not like, oh, there was an imbalance and that's why they're depressed necessarily. It's a correlation, and one thing causes the next, and that causes the other thing, and it builds on each other. So it's not so simple like, oh,
Yeah.
there was a chemical imbalance and that's why it happened.
I hear you. What are some of the most common things that people are anxious about today's days?
Hmm, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I'm just thinking what the audience is
Yeah,
thinking.
I'm not sure because it really is so personal. Like I'll have social anxieties kind of things. I'll have anxiety over people getting sick. I'll have anxiety over, you know, I mean, I don't even know if I've seen like one specific thing. I think when it comes to like OCD, I'll often see it more connected to Judaism because we find that OCD kind of connects to what's important to any individual situation, and anxiety kind of works similar. Like it's often like things that are more important to me, but I really don't see it as one specific thing. It really is very
Right.
specific to that person.
Health anxiety was something that I experienced for a while, and so I can relate to that. Health anxiety means when somebody's worried about their health, they're afraid that their heart is going to stop beating, they're going to have a heart attack, or wherever they go. For me, it was always making sure that there's a tzula or a hospital or a doctor, or going to the doctor multiple times thinking that I'm not
Right.
healthy. I find health anxiety to be a very popular
Yeah,
anxiety.
you know
Like,
why
where does it come from? And yeah,
it's very interesting because you know what the tricky thing about health anxiety is?
tell me.
It falls into the same pattern. I remember working with a guy. He struggled with this a lot, and we worked on different things, and he was doing well, and then he went on, and then he called me back later, and he said like he's just been hitting him. He wants to come back for an appointment. I said sure, and we came back, and what was interesting is that back to those same principles. The idea of anxiety is that there's a message. So for whatever reason, these health situations matter to me, shockingly, right? So it matters to me. So I feel uncomfortable, right? And then when I feel uncomfortable, I do something about
Oh
it,
wow.
which always makes it worse. So with this person would tell me like I have this ache, and it would be like, yeah, we all have aches, right? But if I wonder if it's anxiety, it's very hard to get out of it because I feel that ache. And it's
Right.
like, but I feel it, but I feel it. And what happened with this person was he was doing great until he decided that like I found some, in the Boston, whatever, in the medical clinic over there, they could do a full evaluation. So he started going for that. And guess what happens then? Then it becomes real again. So instead of him being able to be like, oh yeah, that's that feeling, it became, oh, maybe I'm sick. And then he starts doing things which furthers the anxiety,
Absolutely.
and he fell back. So that's why I don't always love the whole tools thing, because sometimes it then becomes you're
Right.
dealing with anxiety as if
So
it's
what did you
real.
tell this guy?
So we need to be able to go back to be able to recognize it for what it actually is, which
Right.
is just my body sending me a message because
I
this
love that.
matters to me. And that's hard.
Right.
Like I want to be clear here. Like it can be tough. This isn't to say like, oh yeah, just be like, yeah, it's just a message.
Yeah.
Like it's hard because it feels so real.
Right. I noticed for myself the health anxiety, like you said, number one, going to doctors was just enforcing it.
Yeah.
So I ended up going 6, 7 times to the doctor in 2, 3 months. And
And you never
and
felt better, by the way, because every time it's like maybe
absolutely
he didn't know this.
correct. And at some point I just stopped going, by the way. Because I read about I watched a YouTube video and they were like every time you go to the doctor you're enforcing your anxiety. So I would sit literally some nights and really feel like I'm not okay and not healthy or weak or whatever, and just allow that feeling to pass and tell myself I'm okay and we're not going to the doctor to reinforce that anxiety.
And that's hard, and that's why being able to recognize that as
But
a
going to the
message
doctor
matters
for
so
sure
much.
didn't help.
Yeah, the doctor
You
makes it
know who I
worse.
went to? You know PA Baron?
Yeah, I don't
Okay,
know.
so he's
A
you
little bit,
know him.
yeah.
He's a PA and he's here. So I go into him and it was during COVID. It was winter. I had some variant of COVID or something, and I went to him 3, 4 times, and he tells me, I asked him what's wrong with me. Why do I feel so weak? And what? He tells me you have diarrhea. I said, doctor, I don't have diarrhea. I was in the bathroom today 2 times, healthy. I never have that. I eat healthy. Tells me telling you have diarrhea. I said, I'm telling you, I eat healthy. I'm okay. My system is fine. No, diarrhea in the brain. So, and that's what I learned. But I love what you said, because how do you deal with it? You go back. And what I noticed in my family is that unfortunately, my own grandfather, he struggled with his health. and my grandmother's also not young. She's struggling with her health a little bit. She needs a refiya shalima. And all those stories from my childhood brought out of me to feel like I'm not safe. We're not healthy. My family is not healthy. Certain things that family history that happened, and even my mother would be like, not intentionally, but she would be like, okay, Zaidi had this and that, and in my brain, that anxiety was there to give me a message that, hey, let's work out this kind of issue that you have with health because it was something that happened back in the years. So it kind of leads me to think that there's so many versions of anxiety, and everybody's anxiety really links back to a story. So ask yourself right now, what are you afraid of, and why are you afraid
Where
of
do you
it,
think
and
where do
where
you
do you
think it
think?
might have came from? Like, where was the
Wow.
start?
Right.
And I'll have this with by the way all the time. So like I'll have a thinking about us, whatever. There's so many different clients, different situations, but like someone and they were like, let's say it's a good example. A woman, she was pregnant at one point in time. She didn't feel so well, so she was in a situation, and then in that environment, she felt very dizzy.
Yeah.
So guess what happens next time she walks there? She's like,
Oh my
right?
God.
So like a lot of times these kind of things can reinforce itself, and that's where things often start from. And it's sad because the things that we do to make it better
Right.
often make it worse. And like it's no one's fault. Like going to the doctor, right? You're like, I just want to feel better,
But
or
you
like
just reinforced it.
yeah, and we're just trying to do our best, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make it better, and literally the things that I do to make it better often make it worse.
Right.
And that's what's like so tragic because like I'm trying so hard. Right?
That's where help from a professional can be useful
because like we could
to
be
get
doing
you out
things,
of it. Yeah, to see the pattern for yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm I'm thinking now that one of the biggest anxieties that people have is fear of the unknown. I know for me, like my mind does not like to go there.
So, some people will make the argument that every anxiety is really fear of the unknown, and although it might not be true to the fullest extent, there's a lot of validity to it.
Yeah.
What we find is that people, even who, God forbid, are in a situation where they hear, someone's afraid they have cancer, whatever it might be, and they'll go to the doctor. I literally have this myself. I have some health conditions, and this is a crazy story. Whatever.
Yeah.
But
I remember that story.
yeah.
If you want, you can say it.
Yeah, it's a crazy story, but I do. Yeah, it's a lot. But let me say one part of the story at least, which is that I had this thing, and I was my potassium was low, and it was coming up on all the labs that it was low. Remember?
Yep.
Yeah. And I didn't feel well. The doctor calls me one day, and he says, "How you feeling?" Because I monitored. I said, "To be honest, doc, like I'm not feeling great." He's like, "Yeah, it kind of makes sense because your potassium is very low."
Right.
The potassium is very, very delicate. So like it's supposed to be about, if I remember correctly, like 3.5 or something. Like under 3 is already like medication. Like 2.5 they'll already hospitalize you because your body was relying on it. Your heart could stop working. It's a pretty big deal.
Oh, wow.
The potassium. It's a pretty big deal. So the first thing is they were looking and they were trying to figure out why. And it was like I had to go to this kidney doctor. Was it kidney or liver? I don't even remember anymore. But like I still remember how like I went to the doctor and the doctor was like, listen, there isn't like what to do over here. It's either like, yeah, I mean, you would have to be on, you would have to be on, you have to get either a transplant, a liver transplant, or go on, what's it called? Go on dialysis.
Wow.
Right? Liver, kidney, I don't remember anymore. Right? So, and when the doctor said to me, like, yeah, that must be what's going on, I literally felt calmer. Now, it ended up being that wasn't the issue.
Right.
But I felt calmer, which was so weird to me. But the argument goes that when we don't know what to do, our body now doesn't know what to do with it. Whereas when I have some idea of what it is, then it's less scary because now the body knows what to do. So in many ways, the fear of the unknown is the greatest fear. It's a crazy story because what happened was I was feeling really horrible. I could almost not walk, and like my joints hurt and everything. And I was going for this lab work and it kept on coming out bad. And then we went for more work and we tried more potassium and this and that. And you know what ended up happening? It was a lab mistake.
Oh my God.
It was a lab mistake. And I felt horrible. And people were like, yeah, because you were convinced it's all in your head. No, you don't realize something. All in your head is real. It's real. When something's all in your head, it's real. Your body reacts to that.
Absolutely.
It hurt because it hurt. Now, where did that start from? Well, one time it might start because you have low potassium. And one time it might start because you literally have the lab script that says your potassium's low, and you can have very similar results. So like if you feel you have a disease, sometimes that actually can really affect you as well.
If you think it and you're afraid of it.
Yeah, it can really have a physical.
It's probably what happened
response.
in COVID, right? I mean, way too
I
many
don't know if I
people were
want to go
scared
into
and afraid.
that whole world because it goes both ways with COVID. We're going to go off on a tangent here because it goes both ways. A lot of times people were really scared of COVID, and their ways of dealing with it was being like it doesn't exist, right? Because that was like how they felt safe. They had to like push it away, and then there were people who their way of dealing was making like a huge deal out of it. And the key, like everything in life, is that middle ground of being able to accept what is for what it is, what isn't for what it isn't, and just allow things to flow.
Speaking about health anxiety, I remember that was one of the conversations we had. A fiery conversation. You remember? I was I was young and ignorant, and I was like, yeah, with the mind you can control everything. But a little bit what you're saying now does prove that a positive mindset, and I'm saying it not in the context of anxiety. I'm saying it is because the anxiety is usually a message to which we give energy through our brain and we make it worse, then for sure we can also make it better.
Yeah, and this is the part that we did agree on. Like, and to be fair, you got me at a rough time because I just lost my sister from cancer, and you were like, "Yeah, we can just heal cancer." If I think about it right. So I apologize. I probably got a little more animated. But to be fair,
by the way, the original episode is on Yisroel Wahl's podcast.
Oh yeah, it is.
So you can still listen to it. It's on Spotify, and it's called
$1 Million Barrier.
$1 Million Barrier, and then or you can just put in a Spotify. Ellie Weber actually.
A special edition,
up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a special edition with Ellie Weber. Yeah, we got a little heated on that, but the part that we did agree on is what you're saying now, which is yes, a positive mindset really makes a big difference. And I think the biggest proof of that is what is anxiety in many ways is a negative mindset, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you could change it by just being positive. And that's where people go too far with positivity. It becomes, you see, because positivity can become like something I hold on to also. That's what we were talking about with COVID. Like I could be like, it doesn't exist. There's no issue. I could do whatever I want and everything's fine because I'm going to be so positive.
Right.
Because I can't deal with the other side. Mm-hmm. But just being more optimistic it just puts us in a better place. Right. Which is again part of the issue that we struggle, so we become more negative, which makes it worse. It's like tragic. You know how one thing.
Absolutely. Last question. What does, because the name of the podcast is positivity, so I always like to finish off with something positive. How does one actually live off anxiety in a positive way? Meaning, what does that look like? Living still with having healthy anxiety. How does it protect one to live a positive life?
I think we would even say it differently. We would say that we're so stuck in anxiety that we forget we can't live in that positive space. When anxiety is, when you're able to like live with it for what it actually is, the amount that's possible, I get a little animated about this, the amount that we humans can accomplish is mind-boggling if only we would just get out of those constraints.
Wow.
Like if we're able to recognize, I feel uncomfortable, I know what that is, it's that message, okay, what do I want to do? It's similar to what you've been doing, Ellie. Because like, what are you doing? You're like, oh yeah, okay, but I want to do this and I want to accomplish this. So I'll just do it. And it's mind-boggling the amount that we could accomplish if we would only just do it. Wow. We're so busy trying to answer for things, right? Like to make it right before I take the step instead of like, it feels uncomfortable. Yeah.
That's so probably you're saying the more you allow it into your life, the more you will notice how it's here as a guide, how it loves you. Like as I said, anxiety is your friend, literally.
Yeah, it's just you make it. You took it to be something it isn't. When it comes to young children, and I talk about this concept with them, I obviously can't talk about it this way, but sometimes I'll talk about it as, like the scary man or like the fireman. We would think about it like a fireman knocks on the door, right? So he goes knock, 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 knock. And if you don't answer because the alarm went off and you have an alarm in your house that's faulty, right? So it's connected to the fire department, so the fire department man comes. You knock on the door. If you don't answer, he starts banging down the door. But if you're just like, oh yeah, he came to, because there was an alarm, but it's okay, then he comes in and leaves. Right. That's
You
it.
started originally with kids, right?
Yeah. I work with kids for
So
many
you
years.
find that kids really have anxiety? Do they have it more often?
More often than
The adults?
I don't know if it's more often than adults. I actually would think the other way.
Right. But you can see how it's mistreated because you treat kids. You can see how their anxiety is so many
Yeah.
times
And it's just
mistreated.
unfortunate because everyone means well. Everyone's trying
Right.
to do their best.
Right.
This is where education becomes so important because,
Right.
like, no one's trying to make mistakes. Everyone's just doing the best
Right.
they can.
I gotta ask this question. Anxiety attack, because people talk about it. It's not the same as panic attack. I mean, although the anxiety attack can be a panic attack, I've had it for myself. I know what it
Yeah.
feels like. It feels an overrush of emotions, and there's nothing really that I can do besides breathe it in, call maybe a good friend, tell them what I'm going through until it passes. But if somebody is feeling an anxiety attack, um, I had it actually sickest before I went to Israel. It was the night before we traveled, and that's when I had an anxiety attack. Literally, I was here in the back just walking back and forth. I was so worried of the traveling, going on a plane. Not that I'm afraid of flying, but for me the whole process in my brain couldn't, like, was really afraid of what's gonna happen. And I remember just my parents giving me a hug and whatever. It was like after 30 minutes, it kind of passed. But if somebody is having, how can one prevent an anxiety attack? And if they're having it, how does one get through it?
Yeah, so usually the best way to prevent is to be in a healthier space, that's like as a preventive thing. But like the what's happening, we want to realize what's going on when we're getting those like the thought attack, right? So like the
Okay.
thoughts just keep on coming, and we want to realize that it's one thought really equaling the next, and the next, and next, and it's like spiraling.
Yeah.
And really, the thing that we want to do is get off the escalator,
Wow.
right? So like, it's hard when everything's escalating because it feels so real. But like sometimes this is similar to like getting off news when we're worried and we keep on checking the next news,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
It's like when you stay in the anxiety mode, it feels a little bit more controlling, like you have control because you're thinking about it. But really, every time we're going down the road, we're kind of making it worse. And we want to try as much as possible to just do something else.
Right.
And that sometimes is our best bet because once I'm able to recognize what it is, it's easier to let it go because I don't have to answer to it. I could just recognize, oh yeah, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And a panic attack isn't that different because a panic attack is really when it becomes more physical, right? If you go really hard again and again, you'll start feeling what a panic attack feels like to some degree as well.
Oh, really?
Right? So the body is just hyperventilating.
Right.
And like an anxiety attack is really like the mind.
Yeah, I remember when my brother went missing, I felt a panic attack. I felt like, oh my God, like panic feels literally like the world is ending on top of me, or the worst will happen.
But what's happening is it's just a spiral going faster and faster.
Yeah, I remember one week my father came home late from school, like it was already an hour late. And I remember also that same thing. I was literally panicking, like, what's happening? What should we do next?
Right.
I feel like there's like no way to go. He ended up being by a kiddish and by a neighbor, but like I've noticed those feelings, and it's difficult, by the way, because some panic attacks, sometimes when somebody's panicking, it's for real, like something really happened.
So this is where it gets. I think it helps us also just be a little bit more understanding of people who are struggling with anxiety, because that feeling is the same feeling they're getting every day on some level, right? Because like, that's why it's so hard, because you're living in this. It's nice to say, oh yeah, by the way, it's a thought, and it's my body protecting me, but it feels really real.
Wow.
And it's hard. It's hard, but there are answers, and I think what I'm going to use one example to end off over here, because I use this example a lot to explain a concept to clients. I say, imagine you have a spouse, and for whatever reason, that spouse experiences any expression of love as I hate you. Their past, what they've gone through, whatever it might be. So they go into marriage, and you have a wonderful woman, and you have a wonderful girl, and a wonderful guy, and he's trying to do his best and do what he can to make her feel like he cares about her. And every time, she just gets, so obviously the marriage suffers. So then they like, okay, we'll go for therapy. They go to therapists, and they teach them like skills like, how to calm yourself down, how to appreciate stuff about your spouse. And that could help a little bit. But imagine she would just, let's say it was her, she would just, there would be a switch and she would no longer experience that as I hate you. There wouldn't need anything to fix.
Wow.
It's very similar. We've experienced things a certain way, and that's why we feel stuck. But it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
And if that could shift, you don't have to feel stuck.
Absolutely.
So it feels like unbelievable that I can get into a world that I won't have anxiety anymore. But really, it just needs that shift, because once that shift happens,
right,
you don't have to be in that space. So there's hope out there, and you really can live a life without it.
Absolutely. And sending love to everybody that clicked on this podcast because they are suffering or struggling. I'm just sending you love, and I want to tell you you're not alone. And
you're not alone, and there are answers. Like it really can get better.
Right.
It really can.
And Yisroel's here to help. So Yisroel, if somebody wants to reach out to you, I know you do coach businesses, adults, you work with children. So if you want to say a little bit what you do, like this, if somebody wants to reach out.
Yeah, I just really got on here just to help out the crowd. But people can reach out to me directly at YisroelWahl.com. I've been focusing the past couple of years on working with businesses, but I still do all the mental health stuff still. That's like what I do. It's almost like, whatever. I went over to the dark side a little bit.
Yeah.
I work in businesses, but I still work with clients all the time, and I'm curious, and I just want to be able to help out people.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Yisroel, for coming on. We really appreciate it. Guys, thank you so much
for the opportunity. I mean, that by the way, the guy's king. You come on, you feel at peace. You could just talk forever.
Thank you. Well, you just validated the deepest, I felt I had this ego thing. I was like, I told you when you walked in, I was like, off camera, I said, like, I don't have anxiety, but I'm here to help the tzibur. But I actually did have anxiety.
Honestly.
But you know what? Now I have anxiety. I don't struggle with anxiety. This is my newest own thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have anxiety. I don't struggle with it.
There's nothing wrong with having anxiety. We could define anxiety when it starts overtaking my life and all that. And I'm not comparing someone who has an anxious thought to anxiety. It's not the same thing. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't work from similar mechanisms.
No.
One of them will be overwhelming, and one of them will just be like annoying, and it's not the same thing in any which way or form, and we shouldn't compare the two. But it doesn't mean that there aren't somewhat similar mechanisms, and when we're able to work off of similar kind of concepts, it really can work for both of us.
Right.
It's been amazing.
It is amazing.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Yisroel. And guys, I want to remind you to please like this episode, leave us a rating wherever you're listening to it. Share it with a friend. I know some of you listen to it and it's not even on a platform. It's just a recording in yeshiva. So I want to thank you as well. If you want to get connected with me, the link is in the description to my WhatsApp. If you can leave a comment, that helps us out. And please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much, and good luck.